Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, soon to be part of the Roku network. And on Pod TV, we talk about global affairs, innovation, and continue a discussion on what we in the world will do to navigate out of this pandemic and return to a new normal, whatever that new normal will be. Today, as we begin the week, there'll be a lot to talk about going around the world. First of all, we're watching the Olympics. We're seeing China's no COVID policy so far working, but we don't know how long it will work. So far, there's been no reports of any kind of COVID infections. It's a very different type of Olympics without people in the stands. And we're waiting to see a couple of Americans win gold medals. We already had, unfortunately, Michaela Kellen did not make it. Shiflin did not make it. She, was fell. She was a gold medalist in the last Winter Games. We're waiting for Nathan Chen to win a medal tonight in skating, and we have a few others. That Juliana Morano got the silver in snowboarding. So we are doing well in the U.S., but other countries around the world, like Japan and Norway, are doing well in the Olympics. With that being said, we want to turn our attention also to Russia. It does look that military exercises are beginning with the Russians on Belarus, their Belarus border. And many Western skeptics believe this is a sign that Putin, who was visible during the opening ceremonies, clearly sending the signal that him and the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping are allies. The new axis, they're calling it, Russia and China. With that being said, 70% of Russia's military looks like it's dedicated to a potential Ukraine invasion. And President Biden is threatening once again sanctions, warning that the United States will not tolerate, or the Western allies will not tolerate, an invasion of Ukraine. And finally, we might talk a little bit about the booster shots in America and how, as we get to a new normal, how boosters are really falling behind in the United States compared to other nations. And I think it's got to do something about how our system in the United States is focused more on treatment rather than prevention. And there's also been a lot of problems with messaging around COVID over the years. So much focus on science that the policymakers aren't able to talk in big pictures about the reasons that we need masks and the reasons that we need vaccines and the reasons that we need boosters. So as we continue to navigate through this pandemic, we also need to look at what other countries are doing to respond. And the countries that have done well, has it been because they've had a more centralized government? And that's my final point. The thing I want to emphasize today is that if you look at China, for example, they have had significant success in a no COVID policy. They've done this through central efforts from the central government, absolutely mandating and making it basically impossible to leave your house to go anywhere. And they've been able to do this with only 5,000 deaths in a nation of 1 billion people. Compare that to the United States, where we have today surpassed 900,000 deaths in the United States. But our system is decentralized. The messaging is oftentimes not consistent and clear. And although China has beaten us on a no COVID policy, and their government is saying that it's proof that they're a stronger democracy, many people wonder whether long term this is in the best interest of China, as a communist government run economy that picks winners and losers may not bode very well for the future of capitalism in China. These are some of the things that we're going to talk about today on World Edition, and we may have a special guest as well. I'll bring with us in today Mark Lee, Nick Paladiva, and others from around the world who will be joining us. Thank you, folks. Well, I didn't really prepare my monologue today, but I thought I would go in sort of like with an open free fall. I did want to talk this week about the Build Back Better climate provisions in the United States. But as we expand World Edition, I want to make sure that we're not only talking about the United States, that we're talking about things that affect all of us. So I thought we would begin our discussion today with Russia and the Ukraine. But before that, maybe the Olympics. So I am concerned about uh, the I am not having as much fun watching the Olympics. I don't know about you all, but it's not the same watching people with no one in the stands. The coverage has been a bit spotty. I mean, it's okay. I forgot to mention we have our Canadian on, Sasha Starr, but
We do have,
Canada. Canada is playing Russia, the women tonight
One
in a big game. That's a big game. But let's go around the room. First, I want to start with Mark Lee. What you think about or do we have a guest, Mark?
No, we're waiting to see whether anybody comes in and everything.
Uh,
But one of the things I was getting ready to say, because I did send an invitation to a couple of folks, is that in terms of the COVID that is going on there in the Olympics and everything, apparently they're sending some very mixed messages. I was looking at the paper of the town that I went to school at, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and they had a likes article from Beijing where there was actually a Polish speed skater, Natalia Malasowski, who wrote in an Instagram post that her heart can't take it. She said that she's very pale and that she has huge black circles around her eyes and that she wants all this to end and she cries every day, is what a Russian biathlete, Valery Vastanova, said on the same platform, that being Instagram. And Unreasonable complained Dirk Schimmelfing, the head of the German delegation, in an interview with his nation's media. All three were speaking out about the conditions they faced or observed in quarantine hotels in China, used by the athletes who tested positive while at the 2022 Winter Olympics. They described inedible meals, little or no access to training equipment, and a confusing and at times seemingly illogical COVID-19 testing regime. So there's some kind of questions as to how this whole process is going, even in the Winter Olympics. As a matter of fact, one person, Malasewski, said that I know a lot of people do not understand the situation. Positive and negative tests, test confirming isolation, suddenly positive tests, later good results again. And that's what she wrote in Polish in her Instagram post that she also posted on Twitter. So it was translated by a Polish radio journalist and all of that. So it doesn't seem like they're having much better luck in terms of the way that they are covering it than the Summer Olympics did as well. As a matter of fact, three-time U.S. Olympic bobsled medalist Elena Myers-Taylor also tested positive after arriving in Beijing and had to isolate, but has since been cleared to compete. So she did say, told USA Today Sports, she did everything she could in her tiny room to prepare for the first monobob heats that begin on February 13th. So there seems like there's some questions as to how things are going, even in the way that things are being done if you are found to be tested positive. So it doesn't sound like they're doing that much better in China than we're doing here
well,
in
and
the
then
US.
yeah, and that's a great point, Mark. Before we go to Sasha, I think that there's pluses and minuses of any system, right? I mean, we hear one story from the government. We don't know if they're underreporting cases. 5,000 cases in a nation of well over a billion seems a bit skeptical to me. But also, it's trade-offs between freedom that we have as Americans, which is leading some people to say we don't want to have a vaccine, we don't want to have a mask, and also what their policy has done. And I'd love to get Sasha's perspective on this. By shutting down like this, it's actually added to inflationary pressures across the world because there's been major disruptions in supply chains. Many manufacturing plants in China haven't been able to operate at full capacity, and then we in the Western world feel the brunt of this. So, could Sasha, do you believe that it's a double-edged sword and that China, for example, Peng Shui, the Chinese tennis star, was speaking with the chairman of the Olympics, and everyone is really wondering. They don't know if she's safe, what's going on. So, what is your thought about that, just in terms of China and where they're headed?
uh, Sometimes funny things happened. I just went to Yahoo Sports to check Russia and the Canadian hockey team. So I typed Russia Canada women team. Now the first thing what I got is meet beautiful singles in your area. So that's very helpful information, of course. But there are so many of them that you don't know even where to start. So now this Olympics, it's quite fascinating to watch. It's very variety of sports of high caliber performances and so on. So to tell you the truth, all this noise. About COVID or no COVID. You see, with Omicron, all the meaning of COVID is really changing because although I must admit people are still dying from even Omicron, but those who are dying, they would probably die anyway from something else, maybe high blood pressure or heart attack or something like this. Um, so I'm not ready to dismiss it entirely, but for healthy athletes who are competing in this Olympics, well, look what Canadian women's team did. They all played in masks,
Mhm.
N95 masks.
Oh, wow.
So they won anyway, 6-1. So who cares to play in masks? So without mask, it would have been probably 8-1, maybe even 10-1. So in masks, they did it only 6-1. So that's not a big deal. But the things played actually the way they were supposed to be played. And so to me, it's non-event. The Olympics is beautiful. It's too bad it will be over in less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we'll wait another 4 years for this beautiful event.
We'll wait another 4 years for this beautiful event. By the way, the coach of the Finland men's ice hockey team on Sunday accused Beijing organizers of not respecting one of their star athletes' human rights, Marco Antella. Matter of fact, Juka Jolena told the media in a Zoom call that the 2004 NHL ninth round pick of the Chicago Blackhawks was not getting, and I quote, good food and was suffering with mental stress because of his isolation. So he's suffering from mental stress because of his isolation, because apparently he was tested positive for coronavirus 18 days prior to leaving for China and produced several negative tests before he left. But the more sensitive tests used by the Chinese health authorities have produced positive tests. So Reuters is saying that and all of that. So the coach has said, we know he's fully healthy and ready to go. And that's why we think that China, for some reasons, they won't respect his human rights.
Nick, what do you think? Should he start drafting the complaint?
Yeah, well, but the thing is, how well your legal complaints in the United States go well in China? I don't think so. I think it's kind of a waste of time. When you go to a foreign country, you're subject to their laws and regulations and their attorneys, so it's kind of a waste of time. I did check the ratings for the Olympics. They are way down
Are
in
they
the
way
United
down?
States. Yeah, they're down 30-40%
Oh,
from
wow.
the last one. So they're really struggling in terms of the ratings, not doing too well. And of course, Facebook had also the problem. They lost the viewers for the first time. And make matters worse, because I was thinking about selling Comcast short. People are cutting the cord here in the United States at a rapid rate because they can go get everything through streaming media, like what
Right.
we're doing. In other words, or like Netflix is doing. Netflix is basically streaming media. They're not on a cable network.
Right.
And so what you're seeing is you're seeing a shift in media. And unfortunately, the Olympics somehow has taken a bath. Now, what did real well, oddly enough, in the United States was the NFL football. The divisional playoffs and the
But
championship games ratings were way up.
they
It's really it's really hard to predict because people are so fickle in what they watch. It's
they are
just like
fickle.
Mark Lee when he puts his thing on. What was that poll on the world's worst president? 455,000 people showed up. I
So
mean,
450,000 people showed up, and of course we got another edition coming up this week and
yeah,
everything. But there has been a major complaint going on. I was actually reading some comments, and I won't pull those up this time. But you are right. The divisional games were very exciting, and we
yeah,
expect and hope that there'll be an exciting Super Bowl. Even though the LA Rams are basically playing what amounts to a home game, as they are playing the Cincinnati Bengals, but both have great quarterbacks, so it should be a good game. But there was this other game that was held yesterday. It's called the Pro Bowl,
yeah,
and I understand that was considered basically like a joke. Even the
yeah,
athletes themselves are basically
yeah,
like,
because you can't touch
this is
tackle it.
not really football. We're not even really serious about this and all of this. So there were several complaints, including from some well-known athletes, that they do not see this model working because
Well, I think that's one idea that I have for the Pro Bowl in the NFL is, you know, maybe they could, instead of doing it during the season or something, make it like a real marquee event, make it like a real game, and to, bring maybe you have it after the Super Bowl, maybe just 2 weeks later, and then really, and then maybe whoever wins that game becomes the MVP for the league.
Yeah,
and put
I
some
mean the
stake
problem
in
with
it, right?
American football, it's just never took traction overseas. Now
Yeah.
this game is getting a lot of attention around the world. Is the Russia-Ukraine border? I mean, this
Oh yeah,
game is pretty exciting
that
because
game is exciting.
apparently Russia moved their. It's like a chess game. They moved their troops now within 30 miles of the border. So they're like, get inching closer to the
They're inching
border,
closer. Does
and of
seem like
course
it's going to be a war.
yeah, well, we don't know. Well, there might be an
Well, hopefully, but
invasion.
I think
Okay.
there's a narrow corridor for diplomacy here, right? I mean, I think rather than keep threatening Putin with these sanctions, which he knows could possibly put Europe into a global recession with increasing gas prices, or the globe actually, because of the Nord Stream pipeline, and we cut off their supply to oil, we're killing the economy, and so I hope that we are actually working on this whole concept of diplomacy, either scaling back our demands of Ukraine joining NATO. At the end of the day, the question I would have ask our audience is, to what extent are we concerned about Russia and China being allies? And
Yeah.
David Walker had talked about the 2034 book, which I'm going to get, about Russia and China being allies, and that's how World War III started. Well, it gets pretty scary when you look at the world and say, okay, you're going to have, Russia and China, which, keep in mind, in the 70s, when Richard Nixon was president, his policies actually enabled China to open up, to work more with the West and to sever their ties from communist Russia, Soviet Union. And now
Speaking,
we look like we're going the opposite way,
yeah, we're going the opposite
and it might
direction.
be U.S. policy that's actually dictating that, right? I mean, in terms, Sasha, what do you think about that? The way, I mean, in many ways, is what the U.S. doing actually driving this alliance between Russia and China?
If you look into history, you should understand that empire is something that has to expand all the time.
Mhm.
Once it stops to expand, it's going into decline and eventually is dying. So, Russian Empire right now is on its way to further expansion. It needs to expand because the people of Russia, indoctrinated of campaign propaganda by Putin and his cohort of different propagandists and commentators and so on, and all major TV channels, they actually push Putin to expand even further. So it's not just Putin himself, it's all Russia wants to expand the new territories. See, they are not doing well economically. There is nothing to cheer about life inside Russia. Most people who can afford, and the most talented people, they are all leaving or already left Russia. So the only way to please all those 100 million or so people is to please them, to expand and show, okay, now we are 30 miles away from border with Ukraine, and next week it's going to be only 25 miles. So people are happy, we are going ahead, we are going to smash them, or so on. That's how the life in Russia is being constructed. It's very unfortunate situation, and that's why any negotiations with Putin actually futile. Let me see, if you have a crocodile is attacking you, can you negotiate with a crocodile? You can try, but it will lead to your tragic demise very, very quickly. So Putin is expanding, and he started his demands on the West back in Munich 2007. That's where he had his fiery speech, where he said that the present world order is no longer and we are going to change it. Well, people sort of dismissed it, but you have to understand, when the head of state makes such claims, it's cannot be dismissed so easily. And indeed, in next year, 2008, he annexed parts of Georgia, 2014, Crimea, eastern Ukraine, Donbass territory, and so on and on and on. I'm not even talking about killing the journalists, the poisoning people, and all the other stuff. That's even beside the point. So here we are. And the parallel is only one. It's a Munich 1938. That's the only thing I can think of. And there is nothing else I can offer. And as much as everybody wants peace, but the price of the peace is very simple. US has to retract back to its own borders, patrol the Mexican border, and that's it. And get out of international scene. If US wants to be a major superpower and be on international scene, then it has to understand how to deal with a bully like Putin is.
Hey, Sasha, I do have a quick question because Nick wanted to know a little bit about what's going on because we do go to Al Jazeera in the Middle East, and I did a little bit of research. So I looked up Reuters, and apparently Middle Eastern stock markets were mixed on Monday as oil prices dipped with Egypt's blue chip index tumbling more than 1%, and they said that was EGX 30, tumbling more than 1% to mark its steepest fall in nearly 3 weeks. And they said oil prices fell as a sign of a progress in the U.S. Iran nuclear talks that could lead to a removal of U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil sales, offset concerns about the tight supplies. And outside the Gulf, Egypt's blue chip index fell 1.2%, marking its biggest fall since January 19th. And they also said that Saudi Arabia's benchmark index closed 0.4% higher, boosted by material and energy stocks, whereas Dubai, and we know a lot of folks who wish that they could go to Dubai, the main share index ended up 0.6%, driven by index heavyweight Emirates, NBD Bank, and Dubai's investment PGSC. Shares of Dubai's Islamic Bank gained 0.5% after a document showed the United Arab Emirates' largest Islamic tender has hired banks to arrange a sale of 5-year US dollar denominated sukak. So I was just wondering, as I put all that together and all of that, and I have maybe a little bit of more Middle Eastern news as well, how much in terms of like stock markets and other things should we be concerned about the Middle Eastern stock market? Because apparently it is a major player in the stock market and all of that. But I was just wondering, since we are going to Al Jazeera, how much should we even care what the heck is going on at the Dubai financial market?
May I ask you, Mark, have you seen stocks like Nvidia trading on the Middle Eastern market? And if yes, what would be advantage for us to buy Nvidia over there instead of US Nasdaq? Do they have high yield dividend paying stocks like, say, Pfizer or MPLX or even well known like Philip Morris, which is Altria Group or some others? I'm not aware of that. So, practically speaking, what good is it to spend even 10 minutes studying Middle Eastern stock market?
So, Nick, you wanted me to look up Middle Eastern stuff, and I found the stock market. So, what do you think? What is the good of us even looking up the Middle Eastern stock market, and should we even care or anything along those lines? I'm going to throw it off to you since you're the one that asked me to look up some stuff in the
Yeah,
Middle East.
right. Well, it's energy, Mark. I mean, the thing is, a lot of the energy that we consume comes from the Middle East, and recently I was watching a TV show of all things called Joe Reacher or John Reacher, whatever it's
Jack
called,
Reacher.
Jack
Jack
Reacher, whatever his name is, right? Okay, and then they mentioned something just briefly that there are more $100 bills than $1 bills, and the $100 bills, 80% of them are overseas, that people trade in American cash at $100 bill level. And I thought, no, that can't be right. So I went and fact checked it, and it was right. It kind of shocked me that a lot of the transactions that are done internationally are with US $100 bills. Well, where are these petrodollars? A lot of them are in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And this is the thing that gets me about if you look at the Middle East versus the West, because I noticed that China considers themselves the East, then we have the Middle East, then we have the West. We're called the West, which is Europe and the United States. And it's like a big risk game. If you look at Dubai in of itself, where's the biggest building in the world right now? Is it in New York, Manhattan?
Nope.
Is it in the CN Tower in Toronto, where
Nope.
Sasha lives?
Nope.
No, it's the Burj Dubai in Dubai. Why is it that the Middle East is so progressive in terms of infrastructure, buildings, and frankly, even media? Remember, we get shut down a lot here in the United States, but for some reason, not on Al Jazeera. And it just boggles my mind that Al Jazeera, why are they so open? And I haven't even attempted China. I'm talking to all the Chinese people up, but I haven't even beamed any of our content over because I get a little bad vibes. Like, we're going to beat you. You guys are horrible. The West is imperialist. No words, I get imperialist. We're propaganda. I mean, it's almost like all this negative energy flows from China over here. But Al Jazeera, they're very open. I don't understand.
Nick, this is going to shock you as well, since I was looking up some other things in the Middle East as well. There's apparently a game industry veteran at a veterans at an upstart publisher, the Four Winds Entertainment, that they're tired of how the mainstream video game industry is treating players in the Middle East and nearby countries. And apparently they're doing something about it. So Four Winds is lending development support to the upcoming multiplayer military-themed shooter game. You're going to love the title of this game, World War III, to address chronic cultural and technical issues for gamers in a part of the world where the player population is rapidly growing. So apparently gaming in the MENA region, which is the Middle East, North Africa, is projected to reach nearly 86 million gamers by 2025 and generate $3.1 billion in revenue, according to a NICO partner studies. But big games are largely developed in Western countries and Japan, often playing into stereotypes and using multiplayer infrastructures that put players in that part of the world at a disadvantage. So,
hey, Mark, bring that up at the media show this afternoon with Mark Themeg, because he runs the esports network worldwide, and he's a subject matter expert on esports. I'm not. Right. And I have no idea what's going on in that whole cult. All I know is this: when it comes to esports, as much as I don't know, here's what I do know. They actually make more money in the esports network than all the movies in the world combined. Right. In other words, these video games I don't play consume so much time and attention and money that if you take all the movies and possibly even television, combine it, more people are watching esports. In other words, I don't want to look at esports versus the Olympics. The Olympics may be getting killed compared to what people do on esports. So it's really a very big industry. And I didn't know about the Middle East thing. I do know about something that's local here. It's this guy, Joe Rogan. I don't know if you've heard about him. Apparently, he keeps sending apologies as more music people move to Spotify. And in other words, away from Spotify and on to Sirius. So he's actually created, although he is the #1 podcaster in the world right now, 93 million views. So that's pretty good numbers.
That's some really good numbers. Sometimes speaking of prominent people, our prominent people, they get and they say silly things and they do stuff like that. And, there's not much going on except for in social media. But, in other parts of the world, sometimes you have to go to trial because apparently a Ugandan court on Monday ordered a prominent author to stand trial next month. And do you know what he's standing trial for? Apparently, he insulted his president. He's standing charge on charges of insulting President Yoweri Museveni and his son. So he was detained shortly after Christmas and later charged with offensive communication.
Sedition.
Raised international concerns because apparently this is a satirical novelist. I mean, I thought part of satire was that you poke fun at people in general. But yes, he said he was tortured in custody and he's appeared on television to reveal painful-looking welts crisscrossed on his back and scars on other parts of his body. So, we have this whole conversation around in the media. Apparently they have trials and they kind of like beat him to death, or at least that's what it sounds like they're doing in his case. And he will be going.
What country is this?
This is in Uganda.
Uganda. Okay. I could see stuff like that. Oh, I just want to tell Sasha, the trucks in Canada that are in Ottawa, they're shutting the city down, finally made it to the news in the United States.
Okay. Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Too little, too late. Of course, all the organizers will be charged and will be dealt with because nobody, even in Canada, nobody is above the law. There
Yeah,
are
but
some laws in Canada, believe it or not.
but the real problem is there's too many of them. Did you see the pictures of the trucks? I mean, you're talking about
There are
thousands of trucks. Are they
exactly.
going to arrest all thousands of these people?
That's why the strategy was not to deal with that as it happens, just to wait until these people will have to sleep, eat, go to washrooms, and so on. So obviously, their enthusiasm, especially if you disable organizers, so their enthusiasm can last 5 days, 7 days. 10 days? Impossible. So all will be dispersed, the organizers will be charged and dealt with accordingly, and all that will be really history very soon.
Well, I guess it keeps lawyers busy because if they all get charged, that means they need
Absolutely.
attorneys and
Absolutely.
trials, and it backlogs the court. I do know that when COVID hit, in Palm Beach County alone, there were 100,000 motions waiting to be heard because it was so
Right.
backed up. I don't know how you deal with the backups that you have in the courtroom system when something like this happens. But it looks like Ottawa,
Well,
a lot
yes.
more people there than in Washington D.C. In
So
other
the,
words, there's only a couple hundred in Washington. You guys have thousands of truckers.
well,
Who's
today,
driving
Right.
trucks in Canada now?
yes,
They all
yeah.
left.
The
Hey, I do
shortage of
have a question to ask. This was for Steve because you're gonna love this one. I had actually heard about this yesterday and everything. But apparently, Jeff Bezos, he's our favorite guy. He's that super rich guy and everything. Apparently, he has wanting to have this Dutch city called Rotterdam to basically dismantle their bridge and then remantle the bridge so that his super yacht can pass through it. And it's like
Yes.
some ridiculous amount of money that he wants them to pay in order for them to do this. While we're having our own infrastructure problems here in the U.S., it's like some ridiculous amount of bridges that
Okay.
are
Well,
in
I,
various serious state of
I'm
disrepair.
glad you brought that up, Mark, because with the Honorable David M. Walker coming up after this show, we're going to be discussing wealth inequality in America and in the world. And this is just an example of wealth inequality. Jeff Bezos has so much money. He's spending $500 million on
Yes.
a boat. Okay, so if you think your boat costs are high, how about 500 million? It is a super yacht. It will be the biggest boat in the world. Except he's not like Trump. He doesn't get out there on Twitter and say, "I'm building the biggest boat in the world. It's gonna be a super yacht. There's not anything like it." Okay, but if he was Trump, he'd be saying all that. Instead, Bezos does it pretty quietly. He's just doing it, and make matters worse, he's doing it in Rotterdam, which is what you're right.
Sure.
But there's a big problem. The boat manufacturer who's manufacturing the boat's going to be so big it can't get through the river with the bridges. So here's what they've got to do. They have to actually dismantle the bridges to get his boat through. And he goes, "No problem, I'll pay for it." Now, if you think about it, when you're worth 160 billion, you're going to spend 500 million on a boat. What's another, 40 or 50 million or whatever to move the bridge? The problem is the people of the city of Rotterdam are a little upset about this power play. In other words, it's dividing the city into two camps. One, you want the job. I mean, can you imagine a $500 million contract to build a boat? That's going to be very profitable. Figure 250 million is in labor alone, 250 million in parts, plus all the money that brings into that city. So they want the money. Problem number two, there's a group that says, "I don't want our bridges being moved because of a super." Now we have the new class of people called the centi billionaires.
Right.
The people worth more than 100 billion wants to build a boat, move the boat through so he can get on his super yacht. And that's the realities of what's going on today. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting
well,
us.
and real quickly, as we as we do our continue our discussion for topics around the world, I just want the viewing audience to know that I will on Wednesday. I'll be opening up with a blog I recently wrote for TechWire called "Smart Cities" and how we can make our cities smart. And my ideas of just advice, just based on my own experiences. If you're listening to the show and you're in a government, how do you become a smart city? The other one that I'm going to open up with is the British monarchy. But I wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, who is celebrating her 70th year and is on the throne. Now, what's amazing, and I'm going to spend some time on my monologue, devoting some time to Queen Elizabeth. but she has worked with 14 prime ministers, 13 United States presidents, and at the age of 95 has announced that Camilla Parker Bowles will be the Queen escort. Now, I know many of you probably don't care what's going on in the British Empire. I have been addicted to the show The Crown. I'm on season 4 now. So I've sort of fallen in love with the royal family, even though my wife keeps reminding me it's a soap opera. But what are your all's thoughts of Queen Elizabeth and the monarchy of Britain? Do you believe that it's obviously shifting and changing now that Charles is going to become the king? He had to wait pretty much most of his life to become the king, and his mother, quite frankly, in the last picture I saw, looks pretty good. I mean, what if she outlives Charles? But Sasha, what are your thoughts on this?
You're
Just
absolutely right. She will. She will outlive Charles.
she
And
looks really good. I mean, everyone keeps saying she's going to die.
absolutely.
And, I mean, she's 95.
And
I
she
mean,
looks after herself. She's probably doing exercises and so on. I
God,
think
I mean,
the only person who could outlive her is Putin, because he's even better shape, and
he's a
he's
fit.
playing
He's a swimmer.
hockey and so on. He's very fit. Uh, he's only, what, 68, 69 years old, so he has at least 30 more years to go, and he'll do very well. Now about Charles, yes, that's his fate. Unfortunately, he, he will be sitting there for another 10, 15 years, and then he will expire, and he will be no king of England.
Oh, wait,
Unfortunately.
wait, wait, just a second. I went to the site you talked about earlier, Meet Beautiful Singles, and I saw the Queen. She was on there.
Oh, she
Okay.
was out
Oh,
there.
she was
Yeah,
there,
just let you
yes.
know. Yeah, right. Okay. But
God
anyway, just
rest,
want to let you know.
God rest Prince Philip. I,
Right.
I love the way that. But I mean, I know as Americans, Nick and Mark. I mean, what is your perspective of the monarchy? Do you believe it is something that has outgrown its time, or do you believe it's important for the history of Britain to be able to look at the monarchy and
Oh,
understand her
you
places?
know, Steve, it's left over from feudal times. I mean, but the thing is, they're all celebrities, and the people who do it the best is the ones in Great Britain. In other words, they do the pomp and ceremony, the celebrity queen, the best ever. We've had on our network the Prince of Liechtenstein. Okay, Prince Michael. Go look him up. When I was talking to Ben Banerjee, I said, "Well, let me go look this guy up." Well, he's worth more than the Queen. He's worth like 7 billion. Queen's only worth like a billion or two. And I'm going like, wow. But he doesn't market himself as well. There's also Prince Carlos of Spain, who's worth billions, and he doesn't market himself very well. There's still today left over a group of billionaires from feudal times that we had the Prince of the Netherlands on. They're not billionaires, but they're centimillionaires. A lot of money is still left over from feudal times, and they just don't market themselves as well as the royalty of Great Britain, which, by the way, they are not even close to the wealthiest uh, royal family in the world. They come from Saudi Arabia and some from other countries. So
Nick,
it's not quite
they all
yeah.
should learn from Donald Trump, and maybe attend Trump's university. It's no longer available, though. But
What? How to market yourself as a royal?
yeah, absolutely. How do you like that fact that his Mike Pence went up against Trump, saying that Trump was wrong and that Pence had no power whatsoever to overturn the election?
I thought that was pretty cool that he actually came out and if you
Like,
looked at what's
yes, that was yes.
yeah, well, I mean, if you look at what's happening, Liz Cheney also has come out, and so in other words, it's like they're
Hmm.
coming out of the closet and pointing their fingers at Trump, but they also get their fingers cut off. Cheney
Hmm.
was censored, and so was
Yes.
another person who does that. So it shows that Trump has a lot of power in the blue collar Republican Party that he represents, and that's just the way it
I
is.
think
So
it.
I
I
don't
think
know what's going to happen. Like,
yes, and I think this is an important topic to continue to talk about on World Edition. I was actually going to mention it a little bit in my closing remarks today, but this whole notion of, number one, I really commend the vice president for standing up and saying that we don't overturn election results when we don't like the results. It's very important for democracies to have vibrant discussions of their beliefs, but we should allow the outcomes of the election to determine who is in power. And so there's been no documented evidence that I can see of any fraud in this election. And if there was, we should be concerned. The second thing is this whole notion of gerrymandering, which in the United States it's a fancy word for allowing the party in power to determine who votes for them. And even where we live in North Carolina, the courts, the high court, our state court, has ordered new maps to be drawn. So this is the third time this has happened. People don't know when they're running, what office they're running for, and it just seems to me that politicians shouldn't be making these decisions. But this is happening all over the country, and so anyway, I think it's important that we get back to what's right. And I'm not saying that we don't want to listen to Republicans. I'm saying bring forth your ideas. Let's have an honest debate. And at the end of the day, let the people speak. And if in next year the Republicans win the off year elections, the then that means that Biden policies were not working for America and the people wanted a change. I don't know what your all's thoughts are on that. Now in Canada, Shasha, it's a different type of government, right? A parliamentary
Yes.
system. You're building coalitions. Do you have as much partisanship in Canada, or do you not?
Well, it's all decided during election. Once election is done, there is a ruling party, or at least coalition, if there is no majority government, and that's the end of the day. The other party has very little to do with real governing the country, except that criticize the majority government, and if they have any ideas, they can always voice them out, but not much more than that. So it is very different system functioning. In the United States, you have now the both parties are in disarray, in my opinion. The Democrats, they have majority in the House and the Senate and the president, and they cannot do anything with all the power that they have. The Republicans, basically, it's a party of one. It's a party of Donald Trump. He dominates the party, and it will be going on for a few more years until he's alive. And there is nothing else could be done about that. It's not a people's party. They don't have any viable goals. They even don't have any programs. They never voiced a program, neither in the last two elections, and I don't think they will have a program on 2024. So, so this is a real joke, and all they do, they're hungry for power, and to have a power, that's all what they care about. That's all they're.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just human nature, and
Hey,
yeah,
Steve, I get.
yeah. I'm sorry, Mark. On that note, only 40% of elections. I think there's a number that says that um, only 40% will be decided by either party. That a majority of the seats have already been decided by partisanship. So, Mark, go ahead.
Now, I'm just going to get back to your conversation around the royals and everything. Yeah, I think everybody's fascinated by their celebrity status and things of that nature. Don't forget, we have a royal that lives here in the U.S. right now as well. That would be Prince Harry, who, of course, married Meghan Markle and all of that. And, of course, there's some conversation as to what their royal life will be, since they have apparently stepped back from their royal duties. And there's even some question about whether they should stay as one of the four Counselor of States, because the Duke of Sussex, which is what Prince Harry is one of the four, along with Prince Andrews, Prince Charles, and his brother Prince Williams. However, there have been some people in Europe that have questioned his role of eligibility for the role, given that he is now living in California. So people are like, how can you be part of this whole royal clique, for lack of a better term, and all of that if you're living in California? And of course, we do have our own versions of the royals as well. Aren't the Kennedys like an American royal? Some people would argue that the Bushes are American royalty as well. And of course, I do have to give Sasha a shout out, because apparently Princess Harry met Meghan over there in Canada. So that's actually where they connected, when they met at some event in Toronto and all of that. But yeah, we have our own versions of royals, and now there's some question about whether Prince Harry will stay a royal.
I thought we have the Kardashians, aren't they?
We do have the Kardashians too, right? We have our media roles as well.
We've
We
had
have
our
our
dynasties. We've had the Kennedys. We've had the Bushes. And we've had our dynasties, and they're, I guess, basically the closest thing to royalty. And of course, then you have the Kardashians and others. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it'll be interesting also to see, for example, at the ceremonies of the 70th, celebrating 70 years on the throne, whether Harry and Meghan Markle will be invited, or whether they'll be sort of distanced away. And of course, Prince Andrew and the scandals that he's had. I don't know whether he's going to be really welcome anywhere near the royal family. Maybe privately he'll be there in the back room, but I don't think he'll be visible with all the scandals going on. But
And
you know,
speaking of scandals, apparently Kanye West, speaking of the Kardashians, is saying that he wants to get access to his kids, and he was playing what some people might say is the race card and all of that, because he is accused Kim of basically kind of like putting there's been this whole conversation about everything from putting out a hit to a number of other things and all of that. But he did delete his Instagram post, which had been critical of her after weeks of feuding, because they were feuding over Instagram over the week. And he had accused Kim Kardashian, or I think Kim had accused him of putting out a hit. There was all this conversation around who put out hits on who and all of that. But it was some more of that celebrity madness. So apparently they said Kanye West is once again lashing out at his estranged wife amid a public feud about their daughter North's presence on, guess what? TikTok. So the 44-year-old rapper and fashion model, who now goes by Yee, that's his new name, took to Instagram on Sunday to share screenshots of an alleged text message conversation with Kardashian's unnamed cousin, showing support over his displeasure of North being on TikTok without his consent. He's like, wait a minute, how dare she be on TikTok and not give me consent and all of that? And there's been all kinds of conversation about co-parenting and divorce being difficult and a number of other things all within that. And then the rapper did take a step on the whole in social media, saying that his estranged wife had accused him of putting a hit out on her. So yesterday, that's all that. And he was basically saying that that was not the case, and that that he had some issues around being that he wanted to be part of his daughter's life as well as the other kids that they have had together. And his exact quote, which y'all are gonna love, because I wish it killed his ear, was, "These ideas can actually get someone locked up. They play like that with black men's lives, whether it's getting them free or getting them locked up. I'm not playing about my black children anymore." Sounds like they're actually mixed children, but he says that he's not going to play on this whole conversation and all of that. And like I said, he did play the race card.
Bravo, Mark. Bravo, TikTok. I think TikTok actually is one of the reasons why Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg lost $250 billion in one day. It's because a lot of people are leaving Facebook and going into TikTok. Number one. Number two, Mark, speaking about black issue, I was wondering, watching Olympics, how come in US team there are very few black athletes? What's happened? Is there another discrimination of blacks? There are no black people in figure skating, in almost any winter sport. What's happening?
Well, that's a good question, because there have been some very successful athletes. As a matter of fact, I reached out to one of them. I'm not sure whether we were going to do Winter Olympic coverage or not. There was a successful figure skater that was African American and all of that several years back. So I did reach out to a couple of those, but I don't know what's going on in the sense of training. I do know that in hockey, there are a couple of African American players that are on different hockey teams. Not a lot of them, because a lot of folks are going more toward the more established sports that are popular. In the case of the Hispanic community and to some degree the African American community, that would be baseball. In the case of other sports, it would be football and basketball and things of that nature. So part of it is definitely getting people involved and interested in the games. And some of those games are new games, and they're in places that are interesting, and in some cases it can be a cost factor, because it is my understanding, and Nick can correct me, but I don't think that skiing equipment is all that cheap and everything, and definitely the ski trips and the ski ways, the training facilities are not all that inexpensive either. So there are some sports that are very much of a maybe more economical, because I did have a friend of mine
You
who said that they would love to get into curling, but I don't know that curling is going to excite anybody in either Durham or New York City and all of that. But
And where are you going to play curling in the South?
Yeah. Mark, you did very well. I think that black athletes are much more pragmatic than white ones because, of course, they will not go to curling and figure skating or so on, where they can make million times more money in a baseball or a football and so on. So they're much more pragmatic, I must admit.
In our last few minutes, as we do real quickly before we get to the closing out the show, we have 10 and 9 more minutes. I wanted to just bring up every week, every day, just a black leader in our country. And Mark, I want to talk more about Frederick Douglass in a few days because I do believe he may be one of the greatest black Americans lived. But today I want to talk about Katherine Johnston. Not a name we hear a lot about. If you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, she actually graduated from West Virginia University and West Virginia State, my home state, and was a mathematician. And actually, her orbital mechanics formulas brought John Glenn back for the first orbit. And then she was very instrumental in many, many space missions. And eventually, they named a building after her at the NASA Center. I think either in Florida or Texas, I can't remember. But it, I think, speaks volumes about Black Americans' contributions to innovation. And, we've talked about Soul City and Durham and what's going on with, NC Mutual and, Black millionaires, in, for example, North Carolina. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a name to remember, not someone that we talk about all the time in the annals of American history, but somebody whose math, led on to do great things for our space program. And who knows how many engineers were produced as, American space program succeeded. It spawned a whole era of innovation in our country. So,
and she only passed away recently. I think
2020
exactly.
in Newport News, Virginia. But that's my Black History leader of the day. I'm trying to do that every day. Just like you, Mark, you talked about Thomas Day, the furniture industry. For those around the world, we're not going to focus a lot of time on Black history on the shows, but just to talk about Black American leaders that we want to honor, right? Joshua, any final thoughts that you want to talk about today as we get ready for closeout?
Okay. What I would like to offer, my opinion on the affair happened last week with Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay.
My opinion is this. Most people are fighting about ABC, whether they did the right thing or the wrong thing, whether Whoopi Goldberg did the right thing or wrong thing, or whatever she apologized about it or not apologized or so on, and how sincere was her apology or what that stuff. Now, remember that Holocaust is much bigger than ABC, Whoopi Goldberg, and anything else what's involved there. In fact, if America is indeed a Judeo-Christian civilization, the Holocaust itself has a special meaning in all that. Because if Almighty could allow 6 million of his so-called chosen people to perish, that raises a fundamental question. Is there indeed Almighty? Or there is not, because if he is, how could he do it? That Holocaust is raising fundamental question of 2 billion people on Earth, and the best scholar and scientists and religious leaders, they don't have a clear-cut answer to that. That's how big is Holocaust. Holocaust divided people into animals and into saints who actually were helping and saved a lot of Jewish people. So this is why Holocaust is even, you can't even compare it even to slavery, because slavery has been with us for the last 5,000 years. So the forms of slavery are different and so on. So what's a big problem? Okay, the Portuguese traders, they got enslaved already people and transported them from Western Africa to the Brazil and then United States and so on, many other countries and so on. It's a tragic situation and so on, but it's not comparable to Holocaust. Holocaust is absolutely incomprehensible. It's absolutely thing beyond even our understanding how, why it happened. And I think that people, as should I say, ignorant as Whoopi Goldberg, should not even touch the subject. She would do much better without that.
But
Yes.
isn't that one of the great religious divides of all time as to whether why good things happen to I mean why bad things happen to good people in general and all of that? I know that even in talking to some of my friends who are religious leaders, that is a conversation that they oftentimes have a difficult time addressing, but they do attempt to address it even in their religious conversations, even in their congregation and all of that. So they try to give it an answer because that is one of the key questions is to whether it is the Holocaust or slavery or a number of other things, why that could happen if there is a higher power. And I actually do think that there is a higher power that exists. If it exists, how can it allow these things to happen? And of course, there's been all kinds of mythology about what happened even in those bad situations. I do remember hearing at a very young age about folks talking about folks literally flying away from slavery and all of that. Now, did that mean that they actually flew away? Did that mean that they had help from a outside source, meaning like maybe some other people that were from another part of the galaxy and everything? Who the heck knows? Because that was like about 100 years ago, and in some cases of some of the longer slaveries, even thousands of years ago, and all of that. So it's one of those great unknown mysteries that we will probably never know until the end of our days. And that's only if there is actually a heaven. If there's not a heaven, then we won't know any of that because we'll just be gone and all of that. So that's just one of those
Yeah.
questions that exist that is unknown and unanswerable, at least as of right now.
Right. And well, we're ready for a closeout. I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and start my close. I only have a minute. Um, I will be back on Wednesday. I want to thank you all for being with us today. My final thoughts as we end the show is, as Fareed Zakaria had mentioned, it's really a tale of two Olympics. How different the Olympics were from 4 years ago in China, the Winter Olympics, when you had China opening itself up, showing all the progress, all the infrastructure, the crowds, the beautiful ceremonies, and today we've got Western diplomats boycotting Australia, U.S., Britain. No, Vladimir Putin. They're standing near the premier of China, scaring all of us that this is the new world order, while we're looking at a potential invasion of Russia on the Ukraine. But with that being said, I think it's important to also, as Americans that are in the West, or looking inward at the looking from the outside in, the United States seems very chaotic. We've had 900,000 deaths. We're very divided. We've had a lot of issues with vaccination and masking. And so, from the outside looking at China, you say, look at a government that's so efficient, so autocratic. They could have a zero COVID policy and have only 5,000 deaths. And in fact, with Omicron, they only have 120,000 deaths, although people don't think they can handle Omicron because some of the vaccines may not work as effectively. But at the end of the day, things like the no child policy of China, which they've tried to change, it looks like it may be too late, right? They're shutting down their economy has actually helped them close off, which is sort of ironic and different from what they were doing up until now. When Dao Jinping was the premier of China, their whole notion was open and reform, and we're now seeing a shift away from that. But in a chaotic democracy like U.S., we can't change. We can shift our policies because we're not so rigid. So I think my closing remarks is we'll be watching China very closely moving forward of, will there be consequences of a closed kind of approach as they return, unfortunately, back to where they were before Nixon took over the White House. Only time will tell, but maybe chaos in some ways isn't a bad thing. On that note, we'll be back next week. Tomorrow on Wednesday, but we'll be back tomorrow for another edition of Pod TV World Edition. From our family to yours, we thank you for joining our wonderful show and discussion. And we encourage you to send your ideas to Mark, Lee, and me, or Sasha Star, or any of our team, so we can talk about the issues that you want to talk about wherever you are in the world. Be safe. Godspeed.